Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to this week's live chat. It's been a couple weeks since I've been here. I hope you've missed me. I've definitely missed you guys. We were on a family vacation up in Alaska. It was glorious, wonderful time, lots of fun. But in amidst that trip, we launched the challenge. Now, the last time I did that, when I had videos come out and I was out of town, I said, I'll never do that again. And then I did it again. So if you had some website issues, so sorry about that. We got it kind of all figured out now. But since I've last seen you, we have had 3 videos in the new series that we're embarking on where we're learning different designs for different shape blocks. So if this is your first live chat, if you're just dropping in, you're like, what is she talking about? It's all on my YouTube channel. It's a free machine quilting class, basically. And so in this live chat, well, in any live chat, I normally talk about quilting related stuff, but the next few will be specific to the videos, and I'll be kind of showing you the examples, maybe giving some tips or pointers that didn't come out in the video. And if you're watching live, you can leave your questions because Jessica is here monitoring the chat, and so I can make sure I answer those for you. I just want you to be successful with the designs that we're learning through the videos. And so it's just a fun way to hang out. So today I'm actually going to recap weeks 1 and 2, or videos 1 and 2. I think I said in the description I would do 3 of them, but I'm going to keep the log cabin ones together. So we're going to talk about chevrons and snowball blocks. But if you're watching live, I have a special giveaway to thank you for watching live. One lucky viewer is going to win a Fat Quarter bundle from the Adorn collection that coordinates with this challenges panel. To win, just leave a comment and Jessica will pick a random winner. So good luck. All right, couple businessy things, or housekeeping things. There will not be a live chat next week because I'm going out of town again. So the next live chat will be on August 8th, and that's where I'll recap the log cabin blocks that we've learned and the curved blocks. So just keep that in mind. If you have done the Free Motion Challenge with us before, you might be used to the expanded resource PDFs that I normally have. I didn't have those this week or this challenge. So if you're looking for them, you're like, where are they? I don't have them for this one. But as always, for every video, I put together free quilting diagrams, and you can get those from the website just to make sure you can print them off and keep them right next to you whenever you're working through the designs. If you're quilting along with me, I hope you're enjoying the videos and the designs that we're learning. If you're not, because life is just too busy, no worries. They stay on my YouTube channel indefinitely, so you can always refer to them when you're ready. So it's kind of a fun way to do that. When I sit down to start a video series or pick out the designs that we're going to learn, I do kind of try to think through different skill levels, different applications. I want there to be kind of a variety. But the fact of the matter is, no one video or class can cover all the designs that are available. So throughout the tutorials, I try to say stuff like, oh, here's where I would use those, or here's how you can change it up. So I really want you to feel like you can take these designs and kind of make them your own and kind of really be successful with them. So let's talk about the designs we learned. Again, if you're watching live, you can leave your questions in the comment box. If you're not watching live, no worries. You can still leave them in the comments. I get on there from time to time and answer those. So let's talk about this. We are working through the custom panel I designed for the video series. You don't have to quilt on it, but all the pictures you see will be from there. When we're talking about things like chevron blocks and snowball blocks, there's so many different varieties as well. So just know that we can use these designs in a lot of different ways. So this is the quilted sample we're working through, and the very first video that came out was for chevron blocks. I tried to pick styles of blocks that were fairly common that I haven't already talked about, since we've already done a Help How Do I Quilt It video series. And I thought, you know what, chevrons would be a fun block to hit on because it's kind of like a half square triangle, but not really. It's kind of like a border corner. Sometimes they make a motif where they come together, sometimes they're off on their own, so they kind of present themselves in different ways. And so the designs I picked can be used in a lot of different ways on there. Now, I will give you a bit of a spoiler alert. Some of the designs we see in the first video, second video, we're going to see a couple more times throughout the video series. When I learn a design, or when I love a design, I want to use it in so many different ways on the quilts, in different blocks. So this is not the last time we'll see continuous curve, but we'll see how we can use it in other blocks and have fun with it. Now, continuous curve, I mean, if you've quilted for a while, you might already know this. It's a line that curves from one point to the next. And depending on how you orientate those lines, you can create motifs, you can create what looks like echoing. It's just a really good, versatile design. I like to joke, I think it's serious, if you only learned continuous curve and a swirl meander, you could quilt probably any quilt that's out there. So really, really nice. And so through this chevron blocks, we saw how we can, well, sorry, I skipped ahead. We're on serpentine lines. I'll come back to the continuous curve. We saw continuous curve, serpentine lines, and dot to dot. So when I'm looking at a chevron block, what am I thinking about when I'm picking designs? And I think I said this in the video, it's the size of the block is really important because some blocks or some designs lend themselves to smaller blocks and some lend themselves to larger ones. The serpentine line design, I love it for that 2 to 3 inch size. You know, if it's like an inch strip, I mean, we're not gonna do an inch chevron, but I'm not gonna try to fit it in a really tiny place. But for bigger blocks, they're a little bit more difficult to quilt. So think like 2 to 4 inches is kind of the sweet spot for that. But in the type chat before we went live, I always get on the live chat about 30 minutes before and just type with all my friends. Somebody said, give me some tips for the serpentine lines design. And I get it. Like for some quilters, it's just this thing that's difficult. And it was difficult for me too. Others are like, it's no problem. I don't know what you're talking about. So if you're struggling with the design, the best thing I can say is download the quilting diagrams and trace over it. Trace it, trace it, trace it till it clicks. But if we're looking for some tips, when I'm quilting my serpentine lines, there should always be one side of that line that's higher than the other. And maybe I'll have like for the next chat, I'll try to put together some graphics of this. I don't want it to be like even because then it just looks like a wiggly line. So if you're getting something that looks more horizontal, really extend it out. And then another thing that's common, I just want one change of direction. It should look like a stretched out S. If we put too many changes of direction, we'll get a wiggly line, which there's nothing wrong with that. But those two things will really, really help you. Like I said, the next live chat, I'll try to pull together some graphics for that. Sorry. I got a little frog in my throat. So with this though, since a chevron, you know, kind of comes together to that point, I've made it more like a motif and quilted a little figure 8 or a little, you know, oval in the center and quilted it out to each side. You could turn the corner if you want, kind of like you would in a border or something like that. But I love how it just kind of pulls up, you know, gives a really nice look and kind of draws your eye to that outer point. But the problem is I'm quilting that serpentine line in 2 different directions, right? One where the right side is higher and one where the, you know, vice versa or mirror image. And if you think serpentine lines are tricky to quilt, normally switching the direction is a whole nother thing. So that is the one caveat there. But I promise once you work with it, it does get easier. Now you can kind of see in this picture, when I have chevrons that come together to make a star, I love it when you put the same design in each of them because it kind of creates that motif and you can kind of see where those teardrop shapes come together in the center. So when you're picking those designs, sometimes you might be like, oh, I want something really, you know, difficult and unique and cool, but sometimes just a basic shape repeated creates a cool effect. So it really, really good design for that. Now in this example, you can kind of see in those white chevrons, that top upper left one, I quilted the same serpentine lines. I just put my teardrop in the opposite corner. So that's just the only difference there. Gives it a slightly different look. And in the other one, the bottom right white chevron, you can see that effect with feathers. So the same idea, using a design that fits that spacing, kind of joining it together with a teardrop shape to get that kind of motif. So really fun way to use those shapes in some different ways. Here's an example of it on actual quilt. It's so funny, when I do the challenges or live chat, I try to find pictures of other quilts, right? Just to, I don't know, to make my persuasive argument, to make you love these designs. And, you know, I go down a memory lane, but this is the only picture I could find really of some good chevrons. And it was a quilt that I quilted for Julia Herman several years ago. But you can see that chevron, you can see the feathers kind of coming together. And I like how it draws your eye to that corner, which is where that pretty diamond fabric is. So, again, works in a lot of different ways there. I couldn't find samples of everything in all the quilts, so I was like, digging through all my pictures, and then I see cute pictures of my kids, and I get distracted, and then I start crying because they're all old now. It's a whole rabbit hole. All right, hey, how about that serpentine, or how about that continuous curve shape I was just talking about? So here's a picture of that. What I love about continuous curve is you can make it as dense or as less dense as you'd like, just by adding more of those, you know, arcs. For smaller blocks, you can just do a couple. For larger blocks, you know, or you want really dense quilting because you really love the person you're quilting it for, you can add more. What I especially love about this is this design starts at one corner and ends on the opposite. I probably said that 3 times in the video. I probably took out me saying it 10 other times. When I'm looking at a quilt, I want to pick designs that look great and are efficient to quilt, or that help me move my way through the quilt. So in this instance, I would love this shape if I have a row of chevrons. I can go from one to the next and continue my way on down. So really fun way of using a design that looks cool, but is also efficient to quilt. Now, I think I said this in the video, but I want to just, harp on it a little bit more. Sometimes we kind of worry too much about the quilting we're doing, or we obsess too much about it. So I'm going to tell you what not to worry about. Don't worry if your curves are perfect. And don't even worry if they come perfectly, symmetrical, they overlap. Instead, try to hit the points as much as you can. So if you look at this, that inner corner where they all come together, some of those curves overlap more than others. I'm not worried about it, but I am trying to quilt them so they go up to that point and come back. Again, sometimes stressing out about all the things will make it harder to quilt the design. So just get it close and move on. And I know I've said this before, but I just want to say it again to anybody out there that's like, I can't do it, I don't like it, it just looks so bad. When your face is 2 inches from the quilting, all you can see is the imperfections. But I promise, when you're done, you step back and all you see is the beautiful quilt. So try not to get too hung up on the perfection of things, because when you step back, you might be pleasantly surprised. Now, continuous curve is all about the home base. Where are all those lines going to go? That point is going to be the home's obviously where all the points go, and that's going to be the area that the tension is drawn to. This is important to know. If you have quilted a block or pieced a block and that point's not right, or it's chopped off, or you don't want to show it off, this is not the design for that. So keep that in mind. Knowing that your designs are going to highlight and hide will help you be happy with the results when you're done. Now, of course, there's 1.5 million variations of this. That's, of course, an exaggeration. There's only 1 million variations. I cracked myself up. But in the bottom right chevron, you can see a slightly different use of that continuous curve, just kind of going out and filling the individual sides of the chevron. I kind of threw that in there last minute in the video because I love it for blocks that look like leaves. So if you have like a quilt that has a flower and it has, those chevrons to look like leaves, it's a really cute, sweet way to add a little bit of texture and make it look nice. Now, you might notice that the outer lines don't go all the way up to the point. Continuous curve is technically supposed to curve to a point and back. And you can tell I didn't in both of those points. But once is a mistake, twice is a design choice. So we can just call it a unique variation. So they don't even have to go all the way to the point, is what I'm saying. Here's an example of some of that design of a chevron block with continuous curve. Like, I'm sifting through my photos for very specific quilts. And this was one I did, forever ago. And you can see a lot of continuous curve in this quilt. This block has continuous curve everywhere. But in those pink chevrons, you can see where that kind of shape lends itself to it. Now, the difference with that design is it's going to start and end at the same spot. So I want to put that in an area that I want to quilt the block and then continue on. If you're sitting there like, I don't know what you're talking about, just ignore me. But knowing where design will start and end will really kind of help you be successful with those. All right, the next design we talked about was dot-to-dot quilting. When I'm picking designs, I'm like, okay, what's different shape, different look, just so I can try to hit all the points there. And dot-to-dot quilting is another one of those super versatile, great techniques that you can use in so many different ways. I almost didn't put this in the video because I'm like, man, we just did a whole video series on it, but it's such a great design and it works so well. We're going to see it in the next video too. So the dot-to-dot design kind of is like a continuous curve in that it goes out and comes back, but I'm just using geometric shapes. If you've tried that and you're struggling with it, go back and watch the dot-to-dot free motion challenge quilting along, because I talk about all of this throughout that video series. But just like the continuous curve design, those lines are going to draw your eye to a particular point, so be sure that that's the point you want to show off. And depending on the effect you're going for, you can add more or less wedges. I would just say try to keep it symmetrical on both sides, but of course, I'm only the expert of my opinion, so there is that. And once you get comfortable with the technique, you can mix up or vary where you put that home base. And in this example, all those lines are going to the opposite corner. And so just a slightly different look depending on the arrangement of that chevron block in the quilt. Where do I want the attention to go, and how can I draw the attention to it? Do the outer points, are they cut off? Well, then maybe I don't want to draw attention to that. So sometimes that's about as deep as I'm thinking. So those were the three main designs. When I'm picking out designs, though, for the video series, I quilt a bunch of different ones. I quilt a lot, and I like try to figure out what I want to show. But I threw this one in kind of in last minute. It's a dot-to-dot design, kind of where I'm going from point to point, but it's so nice and quick and easy. So if you have, a chevron block that's smaller, or you just want something geometric, nothing too fussy, or if you're using a thread that has some contrast to it. So for instance, what if I have a flower with black fabrics and then I have white chevrons and I'm going to quilt with that gray thread? Knowing that it's going to show up more, I'm going to keep the quilting a little bit more simple, and this would be a perfect example of that. I can add more echo lines if I want. I can experiment with all the things I want to do. But I also really love this for chevrons that come together to make a star. And it's kind of hard to see, but in that star, you can see in each of those chevrons, those lines really just draw your eye to the center. So it doesn't have to be difficult to be impactful. It doesn't have to be over the top and the hardest design you've ever quilted to have a good result. So hopefully that's kind of more encouraging than discouraging. So when I started quilting the quilt, I tried some different designs, and so I just threw in a couple of pictures or other options. And here you can see I did some echoing in the upper right. I like how I'm pointing. That's not really helping you, but the upper right chevron, the purple one. So echoing, great way to highlight that block, and then even putting some wishbones in between it. So, and you can see that in the white chevron. So again, just kind of picking what I want to highlight and showing that off. If I look at a chevron and I want to show off a point, I'm going to quilt the lines to it. If I don't, then echoing will be a great option there. So, and you can vary the spacing, you can vary the filler that you put in there. It's just a lot of fun. So hopefully the next time you're quilting a quilt and you come across a chevron block, you will have some good ideas in your repertoire and feel encouraged to quilt those. In the second video, we learned snowball blocks. Now, snowball blocks are so different in the way they present themselves in quilts. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're little, sometimes they come together to make a motif, but we kind of explored some different options for that. The first one was a wavy swirl, where I kind of quilted a wavy line that just ran into itself randomly and popped back out. Now, if any of you were quilting, you're like, hey, I already run into my lines accidentally. You just know you're ahead of the curve. You're doing the design ahead of that. What I love about this is that wavy lines, I like to say that anybody can quilt a wavy line. If you don't think you can, just try quilting a straight line and chances are it will be wavy. And I could have just done one wave, into the center, but kind of adding those little touches just gives it a slightly different texture. So it's just kind of a fun option there. One of the downsides though, and I think I said this in the video, it starts on the outside and ends on the inside. So just know when I'm ready to move to the next block, I'm going to have to tie off and start a new line of quilting, but I think the result is worth the effort. This is going to work in snowball blocks of all sizes. You just add more lines depending on the size. And this is perfect for busier fabrics. So, or when you want a texture. I mean, you could definitely do it in solids, but if I have a snowball block, you can't see the quilting anyway. I'm not going to do difficult quilting in it because it's kind of not a good return on my quilting investment. So nice and fast and fun. It's kind of abstract looking. So if you have a novelty quilt, a child's quilt, just anything where you want a cool texture, something a little different, it's a great design. So love that. Now, if you don't like the wavy lines, because they can be getting your wiggle right can be tricky, you can just quilt one big swirl and come right back out. Now, I'm going to probably do that in smaller snowball blocks. It's very hard to sustain a big curve. So let's just say if I had to pick a number 5 inches and smaller, I don't know, but that's a little bit of a different variation. As you learn any designs in the videos, designs you see other places, look at it and ask yourself, am I struggling with it? What do I not like about it? And change it. You can easily switch these up and make them fit your preferences and what you're working on. So have fun with that. All right, this one is one of my go-tos. It's a really fun little feathery swirl because it kind of fits into the center of that snowball and it ends back where I started. So unlike the previous design, I don't have to tie off and move on to the next block. It's a swirl that acts as the spine, and then I quilt my petals working my way back out. It adds a feathery kind of elegant look without doing both sides of the feather. I kind of like how it's, quick and easy to quilt, but it's still a feather, so it's a good bang for the quilting buck. I love this really in blocks of all sizes. You can just make it as big as you want, just leave yourself room to come back out. But I also love this in squares. It works great in square blocks or corners of borders, and for the life of me, I could not find any pictures of that, so you'll just have to trust me on it. The most important thing with this design is just that the whole thing is filled in as much as possible. When we're learning a new design, some quilters get really hesitant to extend that design out. They're like kind of afraid to do that. It's going to look better if I don't have any big unquilted areas. So that means each individual petal is going to be a different size. It has to. That's just how it works. So don't stress out if it's not all the same. I'm just going to get it close and move on. And then move on to the next block. Now, if you don't like that merge, kind of talk about making that petal, you can switch it up just a bit and do more of a flower shape where I'm just kind of making that scallop look. So I would use this on, almost any kind of block, tonal fabric, busier fabric. It's just a quick, fun, little sweet design to put in there. And if feathers are your nemesis, which I know some of you watching do struggle with that because you tell me in the comments, this is a great way to practice that shape without committing to using it in a big area. So it's a great one for that. And then we talked about the filled square. So I like to say I can impose my quilting will on other blocks. So if I'm working on a block and I don't know if I want to make a different shape, I can. And in this example, we kind of create a square and then add some filler inside and added some different texture there. So just a fun way to just switch up the shape a bit. This is going to be best for solid fabrics because it's going to take a little bit of time to come together. You have those straight-ish lines. And I'm not going to do this in this tiny snowball block. Give yourself a little bit of room for that to develop. But it definitely is a fun way to just add a little bit of texture and kind of highlight the outer bit of that snowball. And the filler you use on the inside can be anything you would quilt in a square, or it can be nothing. You can leave it unquilted. So I know I say it all the time, but it's like a choose your own quilting adventure. Now, I know we already saw dot to dot, but I wanted to show how you can use the quilting to group blocks together. Because when it comes to, most blocks, sometimes they're standalone and sometimes they come together to make a bigger shape like here. And if that's the case, I really want to use the quilting to do that, to group them together and kind of show off this beautiful effect. But I also want to be able to do it in a way that I can move around the quilts or move around that block. So in the video, I show you how I start from one corner, quilt it, and work my way all the way around the block. I think it looks interesting and intricate and really cool. I mean, of course, I'm biased. I quilted it, but it's really fun to know that I quilted it without having to stop and break thread or tie off. So when you watch the tutorial, or if you haven't watched it already, it can seem really difficult when you look at the block and you're like, that's a lot of lines, but it's the same steps over and over again, right? So just keep going. It's a lot of fun. I'm going to use this in probably bigger blocks and blocks where you can see the texture of the quilting at least. If you're not going to be able to see the quilting anyway, I might do something totally different. Now, I use dot to dot just because we'd kind of already learned that design. I'm showing you here more the technique, right? I need a transition, a design, and a transition. And so one of the examples I showed in the video was curved. Same idea, less dense. I use a smiley ruler to create that beautiful effect, same idea. So when you're looking at your blocks and you're trying to decide how to quilt or where to go, think, where do I need to go and how can I get there, right? So I need to move on to the next block. How can I do that? But just because I don't like tying off and starting a new line of quilting doesn't mean that you can't. I mean, do whatever you need to do. So if you're like, it's too complicated, I just want to quilt each one individual, perfect. Like I tell my kids, you do you, boo. So really whatever it is you will do is what you should do. And then just a quick little throw in there, you can use the quilting to break it up into different shapes. This is going to be fun for, bigger snowball blocks. It also works in hexagons, or as Grandpa Ford would have said, hexagons, and some different fillers. So again, kind of using the quilting to create the space I want to fill in. Now, how do you know if it's going to work? Well, sometimes you don't know till you do it. And every time you get done quilting, you will have learned something new. Sometimes it's what not to do next time, right? So there's no, special way to go about it. Just start playing around with the designs and ideas, and I'm sure you'll come up with some fun variations. Now, one thing I did not get in the video, I don't think I got this in there. What do you do in the corners, right? I was like, oh, I can't believe I forgot to talk about the corners. I was so focused on the center. Honestly, the corners, I keep it very simple, or whatever I'm doing around it. It just depends on layout. So in the challenge quilt, I just quilted some continuous curve in that area. The star of the snowball block is usually that center bit or the secondary design it makes. So do something fun in the center and kind of move on. And as you're working, so I'm going to pause. For those of you that are quilting along with me on the panel, in the diagrams, I'm giving you, placement. If you want to know, where to quilt, you can do whatever you want, of course. But as you're filling in the area, so we can see I have some snowballs and I have some chevrons, go ahead and fill in the rest of the area around it as you're going if you want. So if you can kind of see around, I've got some continuous curve, I've got some wishbones. Those busier prints, you're not going to see the quilting a whole lot anyway. So go ahead and fill it in while you're there and then move on. So if you want to. All right, and then we do have some panels left, so if you're not quilting along with us on the challenge panel, you can still get those. You can click the link in the description box. But honestly, whether you quilt on a quilt you have laying around, some fabric, it's just important that you practice and you have fun with it. So that's a lot to talk about, right? But I think it's so much fun that you can see different applications of the same design or different ways to approach it and know that it's going to be fine when you're done with your quilts. So I had a couple questions that came, or one question that came through. Christine said, what % of the quilting do I plan before I start? And this is such a tricky question to answer because it's different in every situation for every person. And I don't want to sit here and be like, I never plan, and have you be like, oh gosh, I need to get to that point. When I started quilting, I would have planned it out a lot more. Now I can kind of like, I'll do a feather and I'll, do this over there because I've just worked with the designs enough. I kind of can imagine what it looks like. But the one thing I'll say, and if you've watched the live chat before, you know what I'm going to say already. It's okay to have a plan. You can practice, you can mark it out, you can draw it out, whatever you want to do, but don't be afraid to change it if it's not working. Sometimes I have this great idea, I try a block, and it's just not flowing the way I thought it would. It doesn't look the way it should when I draw it, right? So if it's not working, don't be afraid to change up the plan. I don't want you to get to a point where you're so committed to what you're doing that you're like miserable the whole time. So that's the only thing I would add there. Oh, Jessica, she's writing, her little hands getting all cramped. So again, we're going to hit log cabins in the next live chat. So this last week we had the first video of the log cabin designs, and the next week we'll have the second video. That block, there's just so many variations, so many different ways to do it. So I decided to do 2 videos on the log cabin. One of the most commonly asked questions, you gotta shake your hand off, right? Like, all right. Oh my gosh, I saw this question. Why does my slim ruler keep slipping when I try to use it with my ruler foot? That's because you got a slippery slim. Did you not get the non-slippery? No, I'm just kidding. That's when I saw that pop up. That was in my head. Slippery slim. Why is your ruler moving around? It can be tricky, right? Because it depends on the machine you're using, but you need to push down and over if you're on your sewing machine. So having a good grip, and then also having a wide grip on your hand, so not so tiny. I promise the more you practice, the easier it will get. As far as the slipping part, it can also be like, oh, look at this. I swear I didn't know this was here. I did not do this on purpose, but I do usually have a slim ruler with me. I'm also not going to quilt past my fingertips, right? So if I'm on a sewing machine and I'm quilting, if I'm holding back here and my needle's up here, I'm going to get some slippage there. So hopefully that helps. But it's one of those things that tend to work themselves out with a little bit of practice. Like somebody said, the dreaded P word. I know, it's practice. How do you deal with a wavy quilt? So these are quilts that have been pieced with love. Maybe it's not flat. Fabric can be manipulated. It can be moved around. This can be used to our advantage, and it can be a detriment depending on how it goes. So if I'm working on a wavy quilt, I'm going to try to ease in that fabric as I go. If I can't, if it's too wavy, it's really friendly, it's just waving to me, you might have to take a tuck, and that just means folding the fabric on top of itself and quilting it down, which can be really kind of like traumatic the first couple times because you're like, oh my gosh, but I promise when you wash it, it just looks like a seam. So you can ease it in. There's other tricks. In fact, if you're watching this, you can leave them in the comments because I know everybody has one. So you can starch it to death. You can, manipulate it. There's all sorts of tricks. But ultimately, the great thing about quilts is they don't have to be flat and perfect to be usable, right? Like if I make a shirt and the armhole is down here, I can't use that. But a quilt, if it's not perfect, if it's not flat, it can still do its job. So just get as good as you can and move on. What are my favorite colors and weights of pre-wound bobbins? Ooh, I like them all. So pre-wounds are nice because I could just pop them in the bobbin case and move on. They're all wound the same, so I don't, get ones that are wonky, and they hold more thread on them because they're industrially wound. I love 60 weight bobbins. You can use any weight in the bobbin, but 60 weight just holds more thread than 40 weight because it's thinner, so I can make it last a little bit longer. And favorite colors, I have the neutrals. So I have like white, light gray, tan. If you're trying to start a collection and you're not sure what to get, I would suggest think neutrals in different values. I need a light neutral, a medium neutral, and a dark neutral. So I can get a light tan, a medium gray, and a dark whatever. But those are my favorites. What stitch length do I prefer? I like them big. That's what I said last time. But I don't use a stitch regulator, so my stitch length is organic, and it varies depending on the deadline of the quilt and the amount of wine I have previously consumed. I'm only half serious, by the way. I tell new quilters on long arms, I'm like, if you need a rule to follow, 10 to 12 inch stitches per inch is a good option. You don't want it so tiny that's going to be a pain to rip out if you have to rip it out. But if they're too long, you won't get those nice tight points that you might want. So what is a tip on starting the serpentine line? Start at the top or the bottom? Either one. And that's also why it's confusing, right? I can start from the bottom and work my way up, or I can start from the top and work my way down. And so when you're starting out, you're not sure what to do, take your finger and kind of trace through the next couple steps just to kind of help get the idea there. So you can start from either one. Sometimes having too many choices is what makes it difficult. How do I make fat continuous curves? Mine tend to be skinny. You're not eating enough ice cream. By fat, I'm assuming like, how do I come out wide enough to go? You will get better at it. It's like kind of like that feather where I said I'm scared to go out into that space. The best thing I can say is if you're going from point to point, put your eye on the point you're going to, and then just trust your hands to bring you there. Now, if you're like, but I really want them to overlap and look really pretty, then you can kind of, exaggerate that. But as long as they're somewhat consistent, it's going to be fine. So hopefully that helps. Can I tell about the half heart that I mentioned earlier in the chat? Okay, so the half heart is the feather shape. So when you're looking at a design and you don't know how to quilt it, ask yourself, what does this look like in real life? Is there something I can, relate that to? And for me, that feather is like a half heart shape. So the tip is that half heart shape is going to merge into the spine, and that's what sets you up for the next one. So if you watch any video I've ever done with feathers, you will hear me say half heart shape a lot. So that's the tip right there. That helps it merge. I have a quilt with 16-inch solid squares. Would you break it up into smaller squares or an all-over design? It depends. That's my favorite answer. You can do either one. If I'm working on a small-throated sewing machine, I don't feel comfortable quilting long wavy lines, then I might break it up into a grid, quilt some wavy crosshatch, or do something like that. I might echo the sides of the block to make it smaller and then fill it in. Or I might do an all-over design if I'm filling like swirls. Sometimes the thoughts are as deep as, what? I haven't done swirls in a while and I want to quilt some swirls. So I think you should do them all. Sometimes I like, when I'm working on a quilt that lends itself to it, like let's say it's a quilt with a lot of squares, I'll challenge myself. How can I do a different design in each square? So use it as like a little bit of a challenge. Try them all. Do we do only two of the log cabin? Do we only do the 2 log cabin blocks that are in the sample, or should we do all 4? If you want to save 2, we're talking about the custom panel I designed for the challenge. Go ahead and do 2 for one video and 2 for the other. Unless you want to do all 4 the same, it's totally up to you. And this question isn't asked, but I will say the way I quilt these panels is different than how I would quilt, I won't say an actual quilt, but it's a learning sampler, right? So I'm just doing stuff in all different areas. When you're actually quilting a log cabin quilt, you don't have to do different ones, so you can kind of have fun with that. How do I stay motivated during the quilting process? That is a whole live chat in itself. I'm going to put this one to the side so I can talk about it. Sometimes there's just quilts that aren't flowing, right? It's not working. The machine is not working. You're not working. It can be really, really frustrating. If I'm in the middle of a quilt, I need a deadline. That's the best way to stay motivated. I know I have to get this done or there's going to be consequences. But if there's no deadline, that thing will languish. So give yourself a deadline or break it up into chunks. All right, Angela, I'm going to do 1 row, just 1 row, and then I'm going to go fill this glass of wine up again and take a little break. So give myself those little mini things. The good thing is it's not too often. Usually really big quilts, that are like, huh, but that's some ideas. But I'll put that over and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit more. I hope that if you're quilting along with me or having fun with it, I never want you to be in a position where you're not enjoying it. Quilting is supposed to be fun. We have enough things in this world to stress out about. Let's not make quilting one of them, right? So just have fun and know when you're done, it's going to look great. So I'll be back again in 2 weeks. Next Tuesday, we'll have another video, but I'll be back in 2 weeks and we'll talk about log cabin blocks. I hope that you all stay safe and have a great couple weeks. And Rita Sikora, I think I'm going to say it right, is the lucky winner of the Fat Quarter Bundle. Rita, if you want to email us on our website, give us your address, we'll send these to you, unless I decide to keep them. No, I'm just kidding. I won't keep them. All right, everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate you taking your time. Appreciate your attention. And if you like the video or need the stuff, give it a thumbs up or subscribe so that other quilters can find it too. All right, I will see you all in a couple weeks. Until then, happy quilting.